one of the things that Western societies did is feminists fought for sex protections for women. One of the first things women fought for was the right to be able to protect their own bodies and the bodies of their children. These are things that we had in legislation, but they also reflect in culture. If we have a broad cultural understanding that, you know, it's not cool to bash your wife, it's not acceptable to be having sex with your children. You know, we have those, they're pretty broad understandings, but they're still cultural.
There's a reason we're discussing them now, though. There's
That's
a reason.
right.
There's a reason.
Well, they are. I
issues.
mean, those things are said in law as well, but law is a reflection of culture as well.
Cool.
Like, and we always set this bar, because when we're talking about all these, the culture, they've used postmodern theory to break down the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. But that's not what French cultural theorists primarily did. They analysed the way power worked in culture, and that's what Foucault did. You know, Foucault looked at the way power worked in institutions, in hospitals. His work was brilliant, really. I mean, I know it's been much maligned, but when you read it, you can see the way. But the problem is when you mix up with a Marxist framework, which he didn't as much, he probably did a little bit, you put culture in an oppressor framework, and everything goes to hell, because now we're talking about who's oppressing each other, you know, in accordance with our sexual identities, and it's of course it's ridiculous.
It's the logical consequence. What else is going to happen when you start framing
when you take sex out of the definition of adult human female, there's no other definition except for in culture. If you define a woman as a gendered object, one guy said, you know, we play this game on Twitter where we ask people what is a woman, and they do it in politics as well. You know, you see it in the British, and we do it obviously because we all know what a woman is, and the game of the left means that they have to pretend they don't know. And you know, you see Tanya Plibersek, God bless her, Alan Jones was trying to, you know, worm out of this. We all know Tanya knows what a woman is, you know. And this guy came back to us, one of us once, and said, a woman is a person who assumes a submissive position in sex. And we all kind of just thought, well, that's back to the regressive sex stereotypes. But what else is going to happen? Of course, you know, if you take your definition out of scientific and you know, material-based realities, and you put them in culture, then you are giving your definition away to whoever runs the cultural hegemony. And so at the moment, the left run the culture. No matter who's in government, the left are in control of the culture.
Of course, they are. And
so they are now defining us. And so we get on, and that's why I wrote my article. I said, well, you know, rape is a reality. I know that I wrote it in response originally to Claire Lehman, who said that feminists are always going on about rape. She didn't say those words, that's a misquote, but something like that. And, you know, we do all get tired of feminists. I'm not saying that they aren't tiresome, but, you know, if we don't stop, this is one of the realities that women are subject to, that is not their gender, that's their sex. And so we're just now, as soon as I got sucked into this, all of a sudden you start getting into these arguments where, well, actually, and the left will say that women are raped because of cultural power issues. And it's to a point that, you know, you can see that in some societies, women are more subject to sexual violence because of culture. That's true, but that's not all the truth. And the removal of sex protections is a disaster for women everywhere. And the fact that we can't see this, and the right, one of my frustrations to start with is the right weren't even getting on this because they're so anti-feminist that they weren't defending women. And that I found that to be a real problem.
When I think of feminism, initially I was thinking, well, if we're talking about equal opportunity for women and letting them do whatever they want, benefiting the entire society, it's something that I was always in favour of. But now it means a very different thing. It seems to mean a privileged position in society. There are some things that, I just, as a man, I can't even discuss. Like, apparently, I can't even discuss the abortion issue, which is just ridiculous. I can't even, I haven't got a say on a number of these other issues simply because I have a penis. That's ridiculous. I think that's one of the reasons why feminism now, like when I hear it, I normally roll my eyes. And there's that Canadian lady whose name I've got my notes somewhere, who describes herself, she's an English professor, she describes herself as an anti-feminist. And she says, it's not that I, to paraphrase, she goes, it's not that I'm not pro-woman, it's not that I'm not pro equal opportunity, it's not that I'm pro all these things. It's now been distorted to the cliche that it always used to be, the man-hating thing. And frankly, that's how I see feminism now. So I'd like you to define feminism and defend it so that we both know that what we're talking about.
Well, feminism, like the left, has been taken over. It's been taken over by, it's got a history. Feminism has a history in the West, and we're talking about Western feminism, obviously, where women started to fight for their autonomy. And now we look back and we say, yes, all those things were correct. We're all on the side of the suffragettes. We're all on but when we look at the suffragettes, they were much maligned. Men didn't just say, like when you listen to someone like Jordan Peterson, he talks about the suffering of men and women, which is both equal throughout the ages, and that's true. But men didn't just say, ladies, you know what, we'd like to just give you all this power now. Women really had to fight for it. And not only there, but here in the unions, we had to fight for our power. We had to fight for wages to be equal. These things weren't easy. And what we used to call the women's movement was then put into universities, put into theory, and it was taken over in the early 90s by what is now called gender theory. When I studied, it was women's studies, and I loved it. I love to study the history of women. I like to talk about women. I like to think about the history of women and how they've not only they've gained their power, but how they lived and how they live now. They bear children. We live a different life than men in a lot of ways. And I think when you're married, I don't know if you're married with children, but when you get the children, you realize that when you're young and you're having a good time, it's all, it's all sex and shopping. But then when the kids come along, you start to live a different life. And we know that reality, especially heterosexual couples, we know that it's not all sex and shopping when the kids come along. The reality for women is different. The reality for women in a lot of ways is different. For women and the empowerment of women and the protection of women. And this is where the left have failed us. What we have now on the left is what's called intersectional feminism, which takes, which departs from even the Marxist analysis, which is women as a sex class. It puts women as a gender class and puts everything in culture. So they want to fight everything because they run the cultural hegemony. They want to fight everything culture. That's why we hear about women on boards. The only women we hear about who are being sexually harassed are the ones in Canberra. They're all white women. I mean, I hate to play the identity game, but they're all white women. They're all rich women. We're not hearing about the kid in the Indigenous community who doesn't go to sleep at night safe. That little girl is being raped in a bed, while in Canberra, I don't doubt that women get raped on dates. I don't doubt that men who are in power usurp their power in a sexual way. I don't doubt that all this happens. But once we start to take away feminism from the material reality of women and put it into just cultural power games, it's a mess. And it's turned men off feminism and it's turned women off feminism. And so when I come into when I sort of decided to start writing last year, I thought, okay, I'm going to start writing and talk to these people about feminism, and the rights of women. And of course, I got a huge amount of men's rights activists. That's what made me end up in gender critical Twitter, is the men's rights activists were saying things like, you already got equality. What else do you want? Well, I'd like to have my sex defined in reality. That's what, and if we don't, we're at risk, you know. And I think
I totally get that, but just to jump on, and again, this is kind of my perspective. You know, the differences between the sexes are real, but we really are all in this together. So, you know, that's the Jordan Peterson, some of the other kind of feminist ideas around that. And it's one thing to recognise there are differences that fundamentally separate the sexes. And yes, occasionally these differences do cause conflict and competition, but more often than not, they kind of don't. They're complementary. And I don't see...
What do you mean? What?
Well, I mean, like we breed would be a bit of an example. And because of the biological, not just the... Actually, we'll go from the psychological kind of side of things. Like men left alone, honestly, we turn into barbarians. We really do. Like, and it's not healthy. But I've been in disproportionately female workplaces and organisations that were disproportionately female. They were worse. They were more toxic. No, seriously. Like, I'm not being ironical, flippant.
No. Two main schools of academic feminism, which is intersectional feminism, which is a cultural feminism, and there's radical feminism. And the radical feminisms are on kind of my side of the gender divide, even though I'm not a radical feminist. But they both believe that masculinity should be managed in government. And I don't believe it should be. To the point where, unless it's like, when we started to talk about sex stereotypes was when it went wrong. And we often get accused. I often get guys saying, well, you started this, you know, this is your problem. You started the whole feminism problem. That's what started it all. It's all the root of all the problems. And some of that is true because we use the word gender, which is the cultural manifestations of sex, to describe the way women are limited in society. So we started to say things like, you know, getting women out of the kitchen. So we want to break the stereotype that women are in the kitchen. But what the left have done is they've taken, I think Helen Joyce raised this point, that it used to be that women were in the kitchen, were doing the dishes, and men were on the sofa. And now the left have redefined it where if you're in the kitchen, you're a woman. So they reposition the sex stereotype so that if you're doing the vacuum cleaning, that's your feminine side. So they enshrine sex stereotypes in the definitions of women. So
but I kind of get that has a degree of validity. And here's what I mean. Like, I was having this quite heated argument with someone one day. Male person identified himself as a feminist and, you know, listed all these kind of feminine traits. But some of the other traits this person had was and this is my subjective opinion, but it's true, that person had given up their responsibility to their family and wasn't providing a male role model for his children, wasn't doing his duty as a man and a father. And so I ended up kind of saying to him, look, you know, one thing that we can agree on is that you're biologically a male. And I will also agree that you're not much of a man. You're not a man. You're not doing what you should be doing. You're not being a father. You are, you know, you're out there, you're being promiscuous, you're, you know, you're not looking after your children, you're not providing a safe space for your wife, you're not doing these things. You're not a man. So I kind of, in an adverse dinosaurish way, I get this argument too, and see, I can't come out and say that I think it has absolutely no validity because there are certain gender roles that are socially, you know, are socially kind of given, and they don't. And although while there is a remarkable degree of consistency throughout different cultures, there are some that aren't. You know, long hair and, you know, fashion and things change over time too. Like if you look at some of the clothing that men were wearing in Tudor times, it's like, dude, like you a drag queen? Like
that shirt you're wearing today is rather liberating, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Actually, it was Offer a quick.
We were already doing that in the, in the 80s. We were already saying men can wear pink, we can push the boundaries. David Bowie was a great, we used to call them gender benders. They were pushing the boundaries of gender. And we're not, I'm the feminism where I sit is I call myself a grassroots feminist, because I think we need to concentrate mostly on the protection of girls and women, and the life of, and also the cultural life. Like I was talking about radical feminists. A lot of radical feminists are what's called gender abolitionists. They believe in the abolition of gender, that we should just get rid of it, which is ridiculous.
Well, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, they mix, because the left have mixed gender and gender identity together. They kind of mix them together a bit as well. Gender identity is a made-up psychological idea that we all have a sense of our own gender, that we feel like a woman or a man. And what the radical feminists are saying is that we don't feel like women. We are women. We don't need to have you impose on us these identities. But the thing is, gender, actually, when I studied gender is a social, the cultural representations that societies give to sex. So the idea that women are in the kitchen, or that women wear certain clothes, they're all gender identities. But no culture has ever eradicated gender, and there's no evidence that any culture ever will. All cultures give men and women different societal meanings and identities, and some of those are probably essential to the way we interact, like you're saying, and breed, to use a crude term, and develop long-term relationships. And this is the problem with gender identity ideology and what we're teaching children, and how we're getting them, and how it's led to them being cut up. Because we start to say to children, you have an internal gender, and if you play with Barbies, in the 80s we were going towards the idea that if you play with Barbies, that was okay. And we know we have this social idea that feminine boys may turn up gay, but it's not just a social idea. Studies are showing that 70% of boys who express a very feminine, expression will be gay, or later identify as gay or bisexual. So the problem with interfering with this with government is that now we've got these LGBTQ groups coming in and saying to children, if you feel like a girl, you might be a girl. So it puts these kids, this little gay boy who might just be gay. That might be his life, that he's going to be a gay man. He might be a straight man. We don't know. But he's a kid. And so we get this idea that you are, the gender is inside, and you're expressing it because you want Barbies, therefore you're probably a girl. And so they get on the path to blockers, cross-sex hormones, when we know that most of these kids will come to accept their natal sex. And some of them might be rejecting their sex because they feel like they don't want to be the gay man. They don't want to be, they would rather be a straight woman. That all these women, transgender women, are celebrated, while the gay man he's pretty boring, really, and they're being widely sort of maligned online as well. Gay men are being called all sorts of names by, people in the transgender movement who, gender critical gay men who say, look, I'm gay because I'm a man and because I like other men. So when you put this stuff in government, it's very dangerous. The war between the sexes, we can talk about you're a man and I'm a woman and let's have a fight about feminism. But what we need to do first is work towards getting this shit out of government, because it's poisonous to our children and it's regressive, because it starts to define little girls on the basis of how they feel. Little girls who don't want to be, they're told that, like you're saying, masculine archetypes, everyone's saying that masculine archetypes are stronger, men are stronger and they get all the good jobs and they get all the money. And so they live their life. A lot of girls who are detransitioning now are saying, I just didn't want to be a girl anymore. I wanted to be a boy, and I thought it would be better. And then I transitioned and I found out that men have pretty much the same problems in life as everybody has.
Can I go off on it? Can I?
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said, but there's one really interesting point, because I've interviewed a former transsexual. G'day, Jeremy. I know that you often tune in. I hope to see you on Northern Vibe again one day. One thing I mentioned to him that's at the heart of this debate, and I'd really like your comment on, that I think is really positive, and you actually mentioned it in one of your articles where there's this one line where you talk about a discussion about the soul being either male or female. Now, at its heart, this is a massive undermining of the materialist idea, that there is no
such
thing.
Marxist at all. They call themselves the left, but there's no Marxism in that.
Well, it's a recognition. What they are saying, what they are validating is what crazy Christians like you and me have been saying for 2 millenniums, and our Jewish ancestors were saying for 4,000 years before that, is that human beings have a soul. We're more than the sum total of atoms. We're more than meat puppets. And really, the thing that I really like about this entire argument, and I don't get caught up in the his or theirs, because it's like any conflict. There's going to be ebbs and flows of where things are going. But at its heart, one day they're all going to sit up and go, this is about the human soul. And I'm going to go, yeah, it is. So now that you've recognized that reality, can we kind of discuss it? Because it's a little bit more important than what someone wears, what job they do, it's the question. So I actually see this entire debate as dangerous as it can be, and as having the government and other people, be they well intentioned or not involved in it, is neither here nor there. It's spiritual. This is a deeply spiritual thing, and it's going to knock our society back into asking important questions.
I don't know. I mean, it is a religion. It's turned into a religion. And I think the problem with it, and I agree from the Christian level, I agree that these questions some of them are very deep, but we have a separation of religion and state, and ideology and state, and we have that for a reason. We have that because we didn't like the way that religious and cultural hegemonies were placed in government. And if you could only get a job if you're, we would remember some of them are Catholic or Protestant, you could only get a job if you ascribed to the cultural hegemony that was in place. So the problem is now is that this has become a state religion, is because it's a faith-based concept. If woman is a faith-based idea, and you have to ascribe to that faith-based idea to enter into the cultural hegemony, that's a bad thing. That's never going to be a good thing. So from my perspective, yes, okay, let's talk about the soul. But Christians don't have gendered souls. I mean, I don't know. Sorry?
Yes, I agree.
We have in heaven, when we die, the idea is that we're all like the angels in heaven. So we don't have male and female in heaven. Male and female are bodily realities for us. We do have gendered roles, and we do act them out, but we don't believe in a gender soul. We believe that men are biological men and that women are biological women. There's a question in government that has been hijacked by this movement about what we do with people who fundamentally can't get rid of the idea that they're the other gender, they're the other sex, and they want to adopt that gender identity. So I think that there's a whole range of solutions for that problem. One of them is not redefining women. So that's in government. So that's my perspective. I think I appreciate that it's a fundamentally spiritual question, but those spiritual questions should be kept out of government. And souls have a immutable worth, and that was in the government. And I don't think that shouldn't be in the government. And that's why we have arguments around abortion and euthanasia,
Exactly.
because we say there's a line where the government shouldn't cross. And we argue about euthanasia in that sense that, okay, people are in pain, but the government should never have, and these was my old left-wing parents, they would have this idea that the government should never have the right to terminate a life. I don't disagree with that, but they were not Christians, but that the sanctity of life was a principle that was instilled in government, that everyone was, in the American Constitution, you know, all men are born equal. These are fundamental religious ideas that have formed the basis of some of the most successful liberal societies in the world. And they were what gay activists used to gain gay rights.
Exactly.
And they were what Indigenous people used to gain their rights. And Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King, used them with the Constitution. He got the Constitution and used it to said, we are people of equal value. And what they're doing is they're taking that concept and putting it into a gender soul and saying some souls are more vulnerable than other souls. And some women, you know, that these are the argument I get most frequently is that transgender women are the most vulnerable of all women. Therefore, they should be put in shelters with women. And the thing, what women are arguing like me is that that idea is fundamentally, some of it's just based in men who don't want feminine women in their spaces. And even Dave Chappelle in his latest special, he said he was Team TERF, but then he said, oh, I don't want a woman, you know, in the bathroom pulling up a skirt to, you know, pull a todger out. But okay, fine. But these men belong in your spaces because they're men. So are you saying that you want them protected with your daughters? And sure, if, you know, we're not talking about trans like your mate who's a transgender person. We're not talking about regular transgender person. We're talking about a world in which anyone can identify you with your beard and your manness can just go up to down to the Cairns town hall and say, I feel like a woman today, give me the certificate, and rock up into the women's bathroom. This is the reality that they're trying to impose on us. We all have to say trans women are women when we know that's not true. Yeah. You know, and I actually get people online and say to me, you just say that because you don't think trans women are women. You're right. I don't think that they're women. Right. Yeah, correct. I think that they're humans that are absolutely as valuable as any other human.
Of course.
And that is at the core of our belief system, that these people deserve absolute compassion. And if they are struggling, then that's what the intersectional feminists who are just, they've run out of things to fight for. They're the richest women in the world. Yeah. They're the richest women who've ever lived. That's and right. They don't know what else to fight for except to, you know, to get equal, you know, representation on a board. Like, these are the biggest problems that women have ever faced. And now women are being subject. There was one woman from a Scottish prison who had a testimony that all of a sudden they had these transgender people in the prison, and they were flashing their todgers at them at, you know, shower time and harassing them, and they couldn't defend themselves because if they called them men, they were given more prison time. You know, what sort of torture is that? This is in a first world country. Women are being subject to being naked with a man. And if they say, this is a bloke, I don't want to shower with him, then that's a hate crime and they get more.
Shut up, get with it.
It's another universe.